Welcome back to FryMinis. I'm Eric, and today in our Monsters of the Multiverse coverage, we're going to talk about the fairy race. All right, hair update number 12,645. We went for it, everybody. We went with a little bit of a chop. We put some color in it. I don't know. I don't know if I can do this one. Yeah, too much. Ugh, okay. Better. Not quite. There we go. Look at that. Okay. I think that's good. Shout out to Julie for helping me out with this haircut. Quee, I hope we get you back someday. And for those of you that wanted me to shave my head, no way. My head is too big and too bulbous to look good. If you go back in time in our videos, at the start of COVID, we weren't sure what was going on, right? So we cut it down real short, and it did not look good. All right, so that should be it for the hair stuff. No more hair jokes, I think. Okay, so the fairy race. This recently came out, right? So I think it was in Witchlight that this was published, which was not long ago. And I believe, from my experience, it was met with generally meh response. Fairies, I still think most people think of a fairy as a pixie. I get that we're saying fairies are like halfling sized, but skinnier. I don't know. I still think of a fairy as a pixie, as a tiny creature. So that it's just a small creature, for me at least, kind of drops the ball on the fantasy of the race. And the overall abilities and everything that it gets are just kind of basic. Not anything exciting, nothing like clever. It's exactly what you would expect if you wanted to build a as safe as possible fairy race. So it's not bad. It's just bland to me. Okay, so let's first take a look at the fairy lore in this book, and then of course we'll go through all the stats. The Feywild is home to many fantastic peoples, including fairies. Fairies are a wee folk, but not nearly as much as their pixie and sprite friends. The first fairy spoke Elvish, Goblin, or Sylvan, and encounters with human visitors prompted many of them to learn Common as well. Infused with the magic of the Feywild, most fairies look like small elves with insectile wings, but each fairy has a special physical characteristic that sets the fairy apart. For your fairy, roll on the Fey characteristics table or choose an option from it. You're also free to come up with your own characteristic if none of the suggestions below fit. Fey characteristics table is a D8. 1, your wings are like those of a bird. 2, you have a shimmering multicolored skin. 3, you have exceptionally large ears. 4, a glittering mist constantly surrounds you. 5, you have a small spectral horn on your forehead like a unicorn horn. 6, your legs are insectile. 7, you smell like fresh brownies. And 8, a noticeable, harmless chill surrounds you. Okay, so if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I love these characteristic tables, these customizing, identifying, personalizing tables. I think are awesome. I include a bunch of things very similar in our PDFs available at FryMinis.com. A bunch of them are for free. Check it out. I like these kind of things. That's great. I think that table's great. The lore, great. You're this little magic person. I understand that a pixie is different than a fairy, is different than a sprite. My brain is always going to associate them all as tiny creatures. That's what it is for me. I hope it's not the same for you, because good luck. But whatever. Okay, just like everybody else here in this whole entire book, we have the same standard +2+1 or +1+1+1 to our stats, common in another language. Our height and weight somehow equal roughly to a human, despite us being a fairy. So yeah, I mean, that's okay. I think it would have been fun. You know, a lot of times races are long lived, and hilariously the turtle, which you would always think a turtle would last for centuries and centuries and centuries, are only live for 50 years for some reason. Like, that's the opposite of what you would expect. I think it would have been fun for a fairy to be like, you live for 20 years or something, and go the opposite, just to give it a little bit. I think just a little bit of a variety here would have been fun, but whatever. Okay, let's take a look at some of the actual fairy traits. You are a small fae with a walking speed of 30 feet. Okay, great. You know, we've talked about it a bunch. Being a fae isn't going to completely destroy your game experience like if you were an undead or maybe even a construct could. So, okay, that's no big deal. Fairy magic. You know the Druidcraft cantrip. Starting at 3rd level, you can cast the Fairy Fire spell with this trait. Starting at 5th level, you can also cast the Enlarge Reduce spell with this trait. Once you cast Fairy Fire or Enlarge Reduce with this trait, you can't cast that spell with it again until you finish a long rest. You can also cast either of these spells using any spell slots you have of the appropriate level. Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma is your spellcasting ability for these spells when you cast them with this trait. Choose when you select this race. Okay, so like this is a good feature. Druidcraft of the utility cantrips, I feel, is the weakest. Is it useless? No. And when we first looked at the fairy race, it had the same kind of thing here. And I'm going to be a little spicy here. A lot of you were really defensive about Druidcraft, which kind of surprised me. It's not without use, but compared to like Prestidigitation, I think it's like no contest. But whatever, it's a free cantrip, but it's not free, right? It's eating out of our like power budget for a race. So, okay. But whatever, Druidcraft makes sense. Fairy Fire is a great spell that clearly makes sense for a fairy to get. Enlarge Reduce, I think, is another great spell in theory in general here. That it can get you up to medium, I think is kind of funny. But the big thing with that I believe the intention is to give you the reduce aspect of it. Kind of like the opposite of a Dwergar. So you're reducing so you can become tiny. And so that's how you can get through those keyholes or all those little areas where people are always going to expect a fairy to be tiny. So yes, that's great that you have a way to do that. But if we had just given the fairy a way to just do that without tying it to the spell, I think would have been great too. Or if they were just tiny. And I know having a player race that's tiny, or if heaven forbid we go to large, I know that can come up with some kind of challenges in a game. But you know what else can come up with some challenges in a game? Flying speed. But we do that, you know. These are all things that we can work through. If you're large, you can squeeze. If you're tiny, yeah, you can get into a bunch of cool places, but you're also in a real big pickle with a bunch of other gear and armor and weapons, and you can always come up with these rules. Wizards of the Coast you should be able to pound these rules out for tiny and large races, I think, in an afternoon, right? Do a UA, do a revision, and publish. I think we can make it happen. I really do. And that's why this is one of the biggest things for me about Fairy is like how cool and fun and special it could be. But it's so just vanilla. And of course, y'all know I don't like to be negative on these videos, but the potential here, I feel this was a wasted potential of a race. But we've got one more: flight. Because of your wings, you have a flying speed equal to your walking speed. You can't use this flying speed if you're wearing medium or heavy armor. So that seems to be the new standard for how flying speeds work for races. Your flying speed is equal to your walking speed. No more, you have 15 feet of walking speed and 30 or 50 feet of whatever. It's just equal. So if you're like a monk or a barbarian, this can get really impressive here, you know? And I think the medium and heavy armor restriction is completely fair. Now, I do agree with people that say, well, it kind of locks you out of playing a lot of races without like impacting your abilities here. And yeah, I agree. But I'm also a person that's okay with like downsides of a race. And if you want to be able to fly, flying can be huge. So I think it's okay here. And worst case, if you really need it, go to the blacksmith and get some cast off armor made so you can just pop it off. All right, last thoughts on Fairy. I know Witchlight wasn't published too long ago, but I feel like a lot of the responses were similar to what I've said here in that it could have been so cool. I know the Unearthed Arcana version was cool, and I wish Wizards had kind of gone a little quirkier here instead of reproducing what they've already had. So that's probably one of my more negative reviews, but I feel it's warranted here with what this could have been. Okay, let me know, please, of course, in the comments. What do you think of Fairy? Am I overly critical here? Is this okay? Should this have been cooler? Should this have been different? And if so, what? Like, how would you have changed it? What would you have done? I really want to hear what y'all think of this one. But check out next video. It's Furball, and we have a very special surprise for you for that video. So FryMinis.com, like, subscribe, discord.gg/FryMinis. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.